This video is going to show us how to use Desmos to help us graph vertex form. Now, graphing standard form and vertex form are similar to each other. There isn't really a difference, just the way they look. Now, standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c, whereas vertex form is a parentheses, let me actually write that down, a parentheses x minus h squared plus k. Now, the vertex form has the vertex in it, which is h comma k. And you want to remember that this one's the opposite sign. Oops, I spelled opposite wrong. Okay, but k is exactly the same as it is. So, for example, these are both in vertex form, and I wouldn't have to think about the vertex that much. So here, our vertex, remember the h is always opposite. So our vertex is going to be -1, comma, +4. Here, our vertex is +1, -8. Okay? So the h changes signs, but the k stays exactly the same. So here, without even graphing and using Desmos, I can actually identify the vertex. The vertex here is going to be -3. And you're like, well, where's the k? What number is k? Well, remember, if there is no number, what's nothing as a number? 0. So the vertex here is going to be -3, 0. It's not written there, it's 0, but it is there. So let's go ahead and use Desmos to help us graph this one. Okay. So remember, f of x is the same thing as y equals, so we have y equals 1/2. Now to type in a fraction, you want to do a division bar. So we want to type in 1 divided by 2. So I'm going to type 1 divided by 2. And then I want to make sure I tap over to make sure I'm not in the fraction anymore, parentheses x plus 3, parentheses squared. Remember that squared button is where the a is, a squared. Okay, so this is the quadratic that we're given. Now, as mentioned in the last video, all the gray points are the important points. So I'm going to tap on them to kind of look. So these are only the really 2 important points that we're going to graph. I know we don't have our graphing calculator, so it is kind of weird to not graph all 5 points, but we're going to graph what we can. So I'm going to go ahead and plot the 2 points that I know. It looks like I can plot -3, 0. Okay, so it's giving me that important point to plot. And then it's saying 0, 4.5. Well, 0, 4.5 is going to be in between 4 and 5, because 5 is right here, so I don't want to be there yet. And then it looks something like this. Okay, looks something like that. Okay, and also, sometimes you may have a negative quadratic, and a negative sign in Desmos is just the minus sign. So, for example, if I have y equals 3x minus 2 squared plus 7 over there, a negative sign would just be a minus, and again, remember, negatives reflect, so that's why they turn upside down. Okay, the axis of symmetry, remember, it always starts as x equals, and it's whatever your x value is of the vertex. So our x value here of the vertex is -3. So our axis of symmetry is going to be x equals -3. And I'm actually going to highlight this in blue so it makes more sense. Okay, the next thing is the y-intercept. Well, let's go look on this graph here. Well, our Desmos labeled us the y-intercept. Sorry, let me get rid of that. The y-intercept again goes through the y-axis, and it says that it goes through at 0, 4.5. So you're going to go ahead and label that point. Now, I know I identified the vertex at the very beginning without even graphing, so let's double check to see if that is the correct point. Well, -3, 0 is there, so it is the correct point. And then our y-intercept is right there. Now, max or min. Remember, a maximum means that it has a maximum point. A minimum means it has the most minimum point. So in this case, we have a minimum graph. It has a most minimum point. There is no maximum. Whereas a graph that looks like this would be considered a maximum graph because it has a maximum point but no minimum point. Okay, the next thing, let me go ahead and write minimum. Next thing it asks us for is solutions. Remember, solutions is another word for an x-intercept. Well, here I only have one x-intercept, and that intercept is actually the vertex. So the x-intercept here would be -3, 0. There's only one x-intercept. You can have 0 x-intercepts, you can have 1 x-intercept, or you could have 2 x-intercepts. So you could have a combination. So in the last video, we had 2 x-intercepts. The next thing is domain. Domain is going to be all real numbers because our x values are infinite on a quadratic. For range, it is restricted. And remember, range is going to be y because it's restricted, and we know range is y values. Now, this parabola opens up. If it opens up, it's going to be greater than or equal to. If it opens down, it's less than or equal to. go ahead and draw that graph just to help you out there. So less than or equal to. And it's whatever your y value is of the vertex. In this case, our y value of the vertex is 0. And why is that? Because when y is 0, at this point, that's the most minimum the graph will go, and then everything is greater than 0. And that is how to graph vertex form using Desmos.